Joe Mullings from 160 Studios in Delray Beach, and today I have a guest from over the pond, Justin Davies, who is the CEO and founder of Wondr Medical, and also, I want to make sure I get this in, you are also a cardiologist.
Well, nice to see you, Joe. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I am a cardiologist, practiced for 15 years in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And Wondr Medical, so if you had to share the intention of Wondr Medical, the platform, how would you best describe it to the market today?
Well, I think all the medical community is faced with a barrage of data coming in, whether it's from conferences, education, requirements to the hospital, and they're trying to access that data on a range of platforms and tools and devices which are not really kind of like designed for it. So I think Wondr Medical sits right in the middle. It essentially enables the kind of filtering of the data so that the physicians get the content that they want to see delivered on a platform which is right for medical practice.
Mm. And when you say the content they want to see, let's peel that apart a little bit. Is that content from a learning perspective? Is that content from seeing what their peers are doing? Is that content from clinical trials?
I think all of the above. And so what we're trying to do is essentially say there are lots of different entry points. So it could be around education, it could be around clinical trials, it could be communications, it could be referral channels, it could be switching on a live video stream, whatever it is. But the important distinction, I think, where we're going as a community, and maybe as a tech community as well, outside of medicine even, is to one where people opt into stuff rather than have the data forced on them. Like we also used to receiving emails that we don't actually want to receive. And in a busy medical practice, I think seeing stuff which you really want to see and you've opted into is really essential.
So is there an AI component to this? With everything with data these days in health tech and med tech, there's an AI on things.
So yeah, the AI here helps us to make sure that we can make recommendations to people for data streams and content which they would like to, which we think, based on the peers and based on previous history, that they may be interested to see. That's over and above actual choices which they've made themselves.
So I'm a new user. Take me through the experience as best you can. I'm a new user, and I log on to, because you've got quite a few users right now, right? How many users roughly do you have?
We've got about 250,000 users on the platform. And so when the users come to the platform, we've got two main entry points. We started off as a company which is focused on serving the cardiology community and have moved into oncology. The platform is now moving pan-medicine. And we have a strong entry point there for delivery of content and around education for this community. The other entry point is really specialty neutral, and that's the Wondr Rooms product, which is a communication tool which allows the sharing of knowledge between individuals in private or public spaces, with the ability for us to bootstrap on organizational access, which allows hospitals and companies, clinical trials to be run in a compliant way where users can be managed effectively.
So I would say, put up my hand, I want to join the Wondr platform.
Yeah.
I then would obviously get maybe a questionnaire saying, what are you most interested in? And then will that algorithm then start to notice what I'm viewing and then drive content towards me?
On the platform, absolutely, that's what happens. So you'll be given a series of questions. Firstly, we're going to ask you if you're a healthcare professional, if you're involved in the medical field. If not, you're still allowed to join our platform, providing you're part of the medical community at large. So we think it's just important to involve physicians, as it is dentists and surgeons, and the technologists behind it, and physiologists, and also, of course, the wider industry as well, because we think this all makes up a kind of rich community of people on the platform. And then we're going to ask people information around where they work, what they practice in, and again, that may be in industry, or may be the actual medical community with the hospital you work in. And then what we start to do is we start to observe your browsing habits on the website, what you go to, what you're looking at, and from that suck in the content and information that we think you may enjoy looking at.
So on the education side, this is an interesting time for this platform, because if you've frequented conferences and shows over the years, whether it's AHA, TCT, PCR, London Valves, gosh, I was at TCT this year, and it was the most bizarre, apocalyptic feel of all time. Marty's show typically would have 25,000 people, and I want to say that maybe there were 1,500, and 1,000 of them were with the companies, and I think maybe 15 booths. But each of the interventionalists you chat with, they were there also for education. So a large part of the conferences and sort of events are to support the ongoing education required. Is that one of the areas that you're going after?
Yeah, I mean, education is critical to high quality medical practice. And it doesn't matter if you're a medical student or you're a very experienced attending, there's always stuff to know, both from, I think, conferences such as TCT, as you described, or equivalents in all the other specialties, but also probably just as importantly from peers, maybe around you or maybe peers you can connect with across the world. And I think increasingly people are realizing this, that it's really becoming preferable to often involve discussions in complex cases with groups of people to make sure that you have a decision which is founded on much more solid basis than just kind of going on instinct. That leads to bad practice in general, and the more we can involve kind of good, high-quality decision-making, maybe coming from education and teaching at conferences, but also I think mirroring that with trusted colleagues who you really trust a second opinion from. I think really that's a very important direction for medicine to move in, and it's one which I think us as doctors feel comfortable with, because whatever happens, we always want to do the best for our patients. Yeah.
And so, if I understand that correctly, you and I are familiar with the Proximity platform, right?
Yep. So
it's a let's call it a borderless OR or cath lab, if you will. It's a collaboration. You can sit on a surgery and you could have 3 peers and even 10 sort of students scrubbing in at the same time, and you've got yourself your backstop. We did a mitra clip with Abbott recently, and it's always precarious to place that clip, and there was a number of people on the call giving some guidance. So is that the type of platform we're looking at, either in dialogue and or in surgical?
Yeah, so I think the Proximity is a great example of an evolution from the kind of conference hall into real-world clinical practice, but creating this dialogue between different groups of physicians. And where we're positioning ourselves as a company is really the kind of network interconnector between the two. So one of the other problems which is out there is that there are a number of these solutions, or we can call like different data streams. And quite frankly, if we were to kind of want to interact with many of these as healthcare professionals and medical community at large, you'd have to download hundreds of apps, and that's really not practical. And we've seen from other services out there in the consumer world that if you're able to link up these data streams and actually suggest stuff which people may be interested in, or make them aware of it so they can opt into it, that you can actually make their life a lot easier by delivering stuff to them in a platform which is really easy to access. And they essentially can use one application to access hundreds of resources rather than having hundreds of individual applications, which makes it very complex for people.
I see people sort of on Skype, Twitter, LinkedIn, email. I don't even know about the patient, privacy laws as we go over states and countries. So the compliance is there on this platform.
Compliance for us is here on our platform, HIPAA compliant encrypted platform. I think the other thing as well, you've mentioned the consumer-based platform, but then of course the medical community is also faced with huge numbers of these applications coming from suppliers bringing equipment into the hospitals themselves, their insurance providers. Many of these are a little bit clunky and old-fashioned, and they don't really work as well as the consumer-based products, which is why sometimes physicians tend to fall back to the consumer products as well. We know that these are not really ideal for medical practice.
And so this is an open API or an open architecture play, or is your intention here to have Wondr be the utility by which all comms occur in that healthcare setting?
No, so we're essentially designed our platform so we effectively have APIs plugging in and plugging out for various resources. So you as a video stream could plug in, you as a journal could plug in, those are 2 examples, or we could output into other resources, maybe for archiving and documentation as well.
So on the education side, that takes me into my next question is, where does that content get generated? Is Wondr developing all the content itself, or are you basically the aggregator and the facilitator of that? So let's say I'm at TCT, let's stay on the TCT since most of our viewers understand that. And there's all kinds of education flights going on within the whole conference. And this year, Marty really blew it out with that digital on the floor feel. And some of those docs, they want to sit up in their room in the morning in their boxers and answer emails and get educated at the same time, which we're able to do this year. So does a TCT plug into Wondr?
Yes, the TCT does plug into Wondr. So they have essentially their own pages and their own structure within our platform itself. We don't actually require the organization to effectively have their videos with us. And indeed, I think the way how things will go going forward is that we'll essentially provide an illustration, a selection of core videos for an organization. But I think we'll be quite comfortable, like other social media platforms, so for instance, Facebook, in effectively linking out to their resources. And I think that gives both the organization and us the opportunity there to serve the biggest audience possible. And they're not tied into any one platform, but yet they can really benefit from the networking capacity that we can offer them. And I think most importantly, the physicians can benefit because we're a technology company. We can invest in technology, and in terms of making things which are right for the physician in terms of compliance, but also just usability, how the user interface feels. Does it work easily? Can it alert them to when something's important starting? And then just have a seamless interaction with a TCT or a proximity video, for instance, and then they can just push one button and they're in. And I think that's really what's been hugely missing in the field up to now.
I agree. You mentioned clinical trials.
Yeah.
Right now, there's sort of a whole bunch of disparate platforms that clinical trials work in as well. You've got so many stakeholders in a clinical trial, whether it's a med device or pharma or biotech. So tell me about how that declares itself in clinical trials.
Yeah, so again, we want to sit right in the middle here. It's not a question of saying that we want to run a clinical trial. We're not trying to run the CRF forms where data is inputted for the clinical trial, but really with a coordinating glue in the middle of this. So effectively, we sit in a place whereby any communications between the study management team, the principal investigators, and the investigators can essentially be seamlessly linked. This could be through dialogue and discussion, asking questions, which could be a one-to-one, or it could be a one to the whole group of investigators. It could also be just material, which is always current, always available for download, and it's specifically directed to that individual site. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. If you're running trials, which I've had the fortune of doing, you're dealing with 50, 100 sites all around the world. They've all got different rules and regulations. They've all got different forms. And you as an investigator, sometimes at short notice, have to go to the patient and say, I need you to sign this form. Now, where do you get the latest form from? It's usually a total mess. You're going back to your email, you're trying to find where the study manager sent you some information. Is this the right version? Who knows? So what essentially we can do very easily with our system is essentially have one button on the application, which is specific for each individual site, which is updated by the study team itself, simply over essentially a cloud link, which means that they always get the right version at the touch of a button. So I think simplicity like this, connecting the organizers with the actual investigators, is critical. And we hope that one of the big things for this technology will be that it will help drive recruitment and make sure that patients enter the study faster. You have less patient dropout, which of course, it's going to reduce costs and is very, very important for companies, because these studies are, of course, incredibly expensive, and the shorter the time period you're able to conduct the study, the better.
Absolutely. Patient non-compliance, the time over it, recruiting on it, and even to your point, paperwork delayed and compounded over a 500-patient study could add months to a study potentially, let alone a bad outcome.
Yeah.
Right. So what's your entry point here in the U.S.? Have you started yet in the U.S. as far as building a team, or is that primarily in the UK or Europe?
So if you just take a step back from that, in terms of our user base, so we've about 40% of our user base is already in the US, 40% in Europe, and then the rest of the world's the other 20%. But we've up to now run the business from a base in London in the UK, but with people really all around the world working. Now what we're looking to do is to kind of formalize a team in the United States, and we see this as a huge opportunity. It's obviously a very developed market. There's lots of medical activity, whether it's in the education, the trial front, the publishing front, you name it. And I think there's a huge opportunity here, as with everywhere in the world, to really make a difference in terms of improving connectivity and helping physicians.
There's a component that I rarely hear spoken about, but I think is a major linchpin in devices moving forward. And we're seeing that with the changing centers of care, of course, with focus factories and ASCs, but we're also starting to finally see the courageous ones go direct to consumer. And if you want to talk about in the US alone, 300 million potential consumers, or how about 80% of healthcare decisions are made by the female in the household, and reaching them so they don't have to necessarily only go to Dr. Google. Is there a potential opportunity for direct to consumer or a consumer facing pipeline on a platform like that with this incredible convergence of med tech to health tech to in-home monitoring?
I think that there absolutely is. It's not in part phase one of our development plan, but what we're essentially doing at the moment is to develop out the routes whereby effectively we've mapped out all the user base, which in this context is the medical community, physicians, nurses, surgeons, and so on. And once we know what each of these do, how they function, their practice, qualities, and also how they refer in and out of their pathways, it's very simple really to build a consumer-facing web platform which actually is able to interface directly with these folks. So that's definitely phase two of what we're doing. Phase one I still think is hugely valuable because there's a huge amount of let's say wasted energy at the moment, which means that the medical community is not communicating in an efficient way really, which could really aid their practice and probably improve standards as well.
Is there going to be an infotainment component of this for these clinicians? Because these clinicians do, one of the ways to keep a high traction, high ongoing use and regular interaction is the gamification of anything. I don't care if it's clinician, if it's a child, if it's you or me. So is there going to be an infotainment side to this potentially as well as the platform continues to expand?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think our view on this is that we've developed a series of tools which can be shaped in many ways. And it's really interesting since we've launched the Wondr platform a few months ago and discussing with the first interested parties of using this in terms of companies and organizations, it's really evident they think of new ways of using these tools all the time. And so I think what our job really is to do is to make sure we've got these API plugins which we can take data, build a platform which is very customizable for them, and essentially hand these tools over to them and see how they use them. There may be need for us to evolve and develop stuff along the lines of you've said, Joe, but it's also possible with our platform that people could link out to other resources or even bring them into the platform as well. And personally, I think that's probably the best option, because what it allows us to do is do what we just want to do really well, is to provide that network glue and to allow others who are really interested in building that content and really interested in building those audiences to find creative, novel ways of doing that. So we really are the supporting act for them. But in doing so, I think we unite the field in this way.
So you will be that hub that these content creators or potential users of your platform will go through. So I always am interested, how do you make money? Where's the revenue?
Okay, so up to now, we've made money by trying to help, say, corporate clients reach the medical community. We've done that through essentially them sharing information around their products, their trials, with the user base, and that's largely at the moment in a video format. Going forward with these new products, we're going to essentially have a model which is very much like Slack or Salesforce or Teams, which is like a user-based model, where essentially we flip things around a little bit from a marketing perspective to what exists at the moment. So at the moment, you imagine organizations want to reach consumers, and they may use Facebook to do this. They may do that by having a website where they have a tracking pixel on, and then Facebook builds an audience for them, and then they use Facebook to target it. We're flipping it around in a sense, and we're saying to these organizations or hospitals or TCTs or whoever they are, that you pay for the users you want in your organization up front, and you pay per seat, and you pay every month for those users. And we make it in a way which is designed for them to easily expand their audience and bring lots of users to the platform. But the beauty then is that they control those audiences. And if they then want to reach out to those people, they're reaching directly to those people who receive a notification on their phone or on the screen, and it goes to exactly the people you want. So we're kind of removing the middleman, because at the moment, imagine with Facebook, you pay that advertising, you may hit the people, you may not, it depends how much money you spend. Here we're saying, you pay up front, but then you guarantee to reach the community that you know, because you can see who the people are.
So right now that's done in an analog fashion at the shows, right? You come in, you bring in a $400,000 booth, you put your 17 sales reps out there, you hope that Dr. Smith comes by and she's like, hey, I want to see a demo on the latest, you get your badge scanned, and then I follow up hopefully after the show. But if I understand correctly, you then can, as an organization, let's say it's Boston Scientific for fun, Boston Scientific wants to drive, Boston Scientific may even pay for the seats if it made sense, because the product is the clinician.
Yes.
And so BSC may say, okay, we'll buy, Justin, 10,000 seats this year. And we'll pay for them and we'll give them as a membership to our clinician. And now they can pipe appropriate messaging and hopefully not step over the line, because one of the worst ways to kill any product
100%.
is to allow marketing to get it.
So you're 100% right, and that's exactly what's starting to happen, Joe. Because if they're wise, they'll realize, as they said, that really what they're trying to do always is to effectively reach people. They're effectively reach people with their marketing message. And they do that by running a symposium, attending meetings, as you said, creating web events, so on and so forth. But it's all really designed to educate people and get them engaged in those Boston products. Well, they've got another alternative now, which is essentially to say we can put people in community spaces that we think they want to be in, or more importantly, they can opt into those rooms. They can effectively just click on links or scan codes to join those rooms. And a company like Boston can then say, we're going to turn your education in from a once a year event to a 365 days a year event, whereby it could just be community, it could be discussion within that community. It could be that they appoint a couple of KOLs as consultants to constantly educate and inform people in that room. Then maybe dropping publications in there and people are discussing these publications. Or maybe that they're saying, hey, here's a symposium we've done recently at TCT, and you click the link and it links out to the TCT website. The whole thing here is them providing something which the physicians want to see. And they of course do this all the time anyway, but now the beauty is that they can continually reach that audience. And then when there is a critical time, for instance, if they're releasing a new valve product, and they say, hey, we want to tell you all about this new valve product which is coming out, and they do that very simply by pressing one button, notification gets sent to the physician, and they know about it. Or maybe at TCT, for instance, they're in the audience, it's a late-breaking trial, they're presenting all about this product, and the moment the presentation comes into that audience group, they can drop the late-breaking trial presentation, maybe some videos, you name it, an invitation to a symposium later. So if managed correctly, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm starting to think of geo-targeting if it's on their phone. I'm starting to think about all that stuff. As you pointed out, what is the consumer market doing currently, and how come health tech is not doing that? We've always been amazing on the leading edge of technology, yet engaging with the user, we've done a miserable job.
Yeah, and one of the reasons is that each of the courses or conferences or associations, in whichever specialty, they try and do this themselves. They're not technology companies. And so what happens is they tend to build an app which goes for one meeting and then it's redundant, and it may or may not work. So really, you need to be the glue joining stuff together. And you mentioned geo-targeting. So this is a very interesting thing. If you can imagine, you may have a user who's using the platform, maybe have no interest or no engagement yet with a meeting. They're sitting in the room at that meeting. You know they're there, and you can make a suggestion and say, hey, you're here. Are you interested to know what's going on at this meeting? And you bring them into this room. And this is where I think that there's huge value in uniting the audience, the user base, but also the associations, the conferences, and them coming in, and us giving them essentially access to that user base, but then giving them the ability to link back out to their own resources to make it very shapeable and moldable to what they want.
Amazing stuff. Exciting to finally see intelligence come into our platform without needing a 510K or a PMA or an IDE, and really influence healthcare on a scale that is global in nature and is scalable in a way that within 1 year, you could have hundreds of thousands or even potentially millions of users influencing healthcare and medicine.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right. I think what we know from consumer products, in tech products, is if you develop products which people really want, they can adopt them very, very fast. And you obviously need to let them know about them. But once there is a product there which works well and it fits a real need, adoption can happen very rapidly.
So what's happening as I take us out? What's happening over the next 6 to 12 months with Wondr? What should we be watching for if people are interested in reaching out to you and joining the team? What does that look like?
So important things to know. We're just closing an investment round now, which is a big investment round for us, which will allow us to really significantly expand our team and also expand our development and reach into new areas, so as we've been discussing today. But we're really looking, as you said earlier, to build out a US-based team. Two main areas we're looking to build out. One is around clinical trials, and one is around interactivity around the hospitals and reaching out to referring physicians. And we're looking for motivated, intelligent, dynamic individuals who really want to come on this journey with us, and really want to try and influence the medical messaging and help, I think, ultimately medical care all around the world.
Fascinating. Is there anything we didn't chat about that we should have?
I think there's a lot of jobs out there which are quite meaningless. People do a lot of software jobs, particularly where they're working at Facebook. They're getting compensated very well, but their job really is around improving an algorithm, reducing it by 100 milliseconds over the course of a year to increase their revenue by a few $1 million. And of course, that's a great achievement for the organization. But I wonder, and I think often people question whether that's a great achievement for humankind. And I think that one thing which I personally feel is that there's an opportunity with this product if we connect individuals in the medical community all around the world to actually be a real force for good, and to actually, through sharing of knowledge, improve communications and really improve healthcare to everyone. And I'll give you a great example of this. There's an organization which essentially helps treat clubfoot in the third world. And they rely on a referral base, often from very remote locations, coming into the cities within these third world countries, but then also referring out to hubs in the US and Europe and the UK and so on and so forth. If you just think of the possibilities here in terms of having a technology which is designed for information sharing, that image could be moved almost instantly from one location to another. You can join together teams of people from different geographies all in one space, and they can really help improve knowledge sharing and thus treatment for people very simply. So it is a real opportunity to do something special and do something which I think is really meaningful.
I agree. And it absolutely increases access, improves outcomes, reduces costs, and really allows that mind share to take place right now, because we are entrenched in a real siloed environment in the comms in the healthcare world. So fascinating stuff. Well, I am excited to be able to introduce Wondr Medical to the US platform and the platform around the world. And I appreciate you coming over on our side of the pond.
Thanks very much for having me, Joe.
You bet. Joe Mullings from 160 Studios in Delray Beach. Be well.